On today's episode of SaaSOps Life virtual event.
Do real hands up. Hands up who's done a migration. Are we, it's everybody. Yeah, almost, yeah.
If somebody's approaching their first migration and has no idea where to start, what tips do these experts have for that person?
Have a silent pause. This is where I'll edit in a radio commercial from our sponsors. Dominic's not here to say that it's recording to the cloud, but we know it is because the red light is flashing. So welcome to episode 19 of our regular Solve meetings. We have been remotely working from home for almost a year now. It is almost March around the corner. I think we all have to have a COVID-versary or COVID anniversary for working from home on March the 16th. I know I have something planned. Myself, I'm Colin McCarthy. We have a good collection and selection of sysadmins from around the United States and Europe as well joining us today, because we're going to talk about data and user migration. This can often happen due to mergers and acquisitions, but also a change in direction. We all know that CIOs like to come in and deploy their preferred application as opposed to what was previously there. And these migrations might, traditionally these migrations would have been Exchange to Google, but now they could be Office 365 to Google, Google to Google, Google to Office 365, Box to Ignite, Ignite to Ignite.
Search.
I turned her off. Oh, I hate it when the assistant does that. I've put her face down. The phone should know to be silent. Ignite to Google Drive, Dropbox to OneDrive, and there's tons of combinations. So welcome. Thank you for joining. I know you guys have done migrations yourselves in the past. So where do we start apart from turning around and walking away quietly so nobody gives us this project to do in the first place?
This was a Google to Google migration or just an all-encompassing?
Anything. What have we done?
Yeah.
Personally, I have done, back in the day, in 2011, we did a Google to Google. I've done Exchange to Google about 2 or 3 times. Office 365 to Google 3 or 4 times. That's relatively easy with email. You just get hit with API limits. Yeah.
Google to Google is interesting. What you do is you first download Microsoft Outlook onto your laptop and just set up a bunch of IMAP integrations between all your Google accounts. You might need to hire a bunch of carrier pigeons to sustain the troops while you're. I'm going to stop now. My threshold of continued bad jokes are way over limit on this.
African or European swallows?
I will say it doesn't feel that much different than doing that. Like, seriously. It took me a while, I think, when I was doing Google and Office migrations to realize that doesn't matter which direction you're doing them in, they're exactly the same. Like, all the tools out there to do them are exactly the same.
The joke spawns off actual previous experience where I had a client who insisted on using Microsoft Outlook for everything, but they were a Google client, Gmail client, and they wanted the integration to always work. And then they wanted to change their primary domain and lose the old one. I was just like, well, since everyone already has, this set up, I was able to kind of open up some things, let them self-serve. Like, you can transfer your own stuff to the new domain. And they did. It was like a 20-person company. So it was easy to kind of flag it over.
That is wildly common to use Outlook with Google, and I hate it.
Mail for Mac doesn't work well. Agreed? Anyone? Yeah? Yeah.
And yet people love it and still do it.
We don't support it. In our company, we tell people flat out, it's like, you can use it. We will not support it. If you have problems with it,
we don't allow IMAP, so they can't use it.
Although
the IMAP thing is like really, the IMAP thing is transferring email over IMAP is always weird, I think, because like we've taken this very hard stance against IMAP. And so I'm like, now I'm going to move your stuff around and I'm going to go turn that thing on that I said you should never ever use.
I will say there are times though when IMAP has actually saved us, because not my current role, but other times where because messages were cached in the IMAP, like cached and backed up on a like a previous backup, we could restore messages that accidentally got deleted forever, and we could actually bring them back because we had that cache. But
so is it easier with 20 users as opposed to 200 or 2,000? Does size matter? Is it all about the comms and the process that you have?
Well, it's also that and how much data they have. So
Yeah, I
20
was gonna
users
say.
can have more data than 100 users if you try hard.
Right.
Like our top 20 in our current migration definitely have more data than the next 100 combined.
I migrated one user once with over 2 terabytes of data, and that took a long time and was painful because it kept stopping and we'd have to restart it. So
Well, now you wouldn't be able to do that, would you?
that was Google to Google. So
Well, I know 2 terabytes per user is the limit.
Um,
Aggregated.
right.
Yeah, I think I had the same experience as well for Google to Google migration. One user with ton of data, and the migration tools actually stopped. So it was originally scanned
You
the
can only
source
upload,
first.
like, so much.
Yeah, and the source scan would eventually fail after like running for days, weeks without doing anything. So ended up using, I think, either GAM or rclone to actually copy the data from source to destination.
well, I think that's a good point too. You know, when you have less people, you think, oh, I can do this myself, but I don't need to, like another tool or to use a contractor outside that helps us. When you have a lot more people, you can actually justify using a much better process that makes it.
I
a
know
little
tons
easier.
of people who have done like manual hand migrations because they only had 20, 40 people.
Yeah, I
Jesse
guess if you
Nolan
want,
moved his own org onto G Suite by hand. He didn't know you could hire somebody to do that.
yes, I guess you could do it sort of in a snail mail type of way of doing Google Takeout and then ingesting it into the new platform that you were using. Obviously, there is for doing email. There is the built-in data migration tool. There is G Suite Migrate, and there are a whole host of other platforms and tools out there now. What's very interesting in my
Equivalent
research.
service
Pardon?
for Microsoft.
Huh?
Is there an equivalent service for Microsoft?
So yes, there are some growing number of tools, and what's very interesting is some of these independent players are being bought up by the larger players.
Yeah, I think Boover got bought out by Microsoft, right?
Yes, yeah, and then Cloud Path Fast or Cloud Fast Path got bought up by Box. I think it was. So it's interesting that these, the little cottage industry of data migration tools are being gobbled up by the data storage companies. What tools have people been using?
Well, there's the gold standard in Google migrations, Cloud M.
Why would you say it's the
Every
gold
migration
standard?
I've ever contracted someone to do was using Cloud M.
And why would you call it the gold standard? Is it because
Everybody seems to use it for Google migrations. Like, I'm not even kidding.
Are they the best? Is that, I mean,
I
people
don't
have good
know.
experiences?
I've never actually used it. I only contract with people who do.
Like I've seen, what is it, BitTitan migration waves being used as well, and they seem to have different certification. I think, especially if you're in like a healthcare type of industry, I think they have either SOC or HIPAA or one of those certifications.
All right, is everybody using a managed provider or doing it themselves? Hands up. Let's do a hands up. We have a little hands up program. Maybe there isn't. Maybe we can actually do a real hands up. Hands up. Who's done a migration? Is everybody? Yeah, almost. Yeah, Steve, Randy's almost done one. Caleb's, the two Calebs are the only ones that haven't, I think.
That's such a lie, though.
Yeah.
Simply just done a Dropbox to Drive one so far, and I'm about to dive into some Google migration, whole domains migrations.
So what? How did the Dropbox to Drive go, and what drove that? Was it platform consolidation or changing business needs?
It was an acquisition, and it was half of the content. So the domain and the email still needs to come over, but Drive needed to come over more immediately. And so I ended up working with a third party contractor who just kind of took care of it and got it done. And then about 2 weeks after that, I found that we had a Windows server sitting around that had some software installed on it to do exactly that. I could have done it myself, but whatever. Whatever. They made it simple. It was great. Just took care of it. So that was fairly easily done. Yeah, I'm definitely learning about all of the full domain migration stuff, and the email stuff is going to be fun.
Yes, there is. Obviously, there's a cost involved with a managed service, but with everything else that's asked of IT, and the fact that these migrations have to go off perfectly, it can be well worthwhile the expense. That's why you get these specialist resellers and companies to do that. How are people managing the permission side? Because obviously this isn't a move of the data. This is where everybody starts to have that fear look in their eyes. But this is obviously, you're not moving the data, you're copying it. So what have we learned? What tips, tricks, horror stories?
I don't even want to go into it. GAM as a lifesaver. I will say that GAM with Google is right there.
Well, and if Google itself didn't allow us to have the reporting that we have on our files, this would not be possible. To pull all the file details like this, especially because Google is always changing things. I'm not kidding when I say I think Tucker and I know more about the way Google Drive works than Google does at this point. We've done so many tests and seen so many wild off-the-wall behaviors that shouldn't even be possible, but they are. So
Paul was asking about MoveBot, and I've been talking to the guys over there, Jaden and Michael, who are the co-founders, and they were saying that they have a lot of people that don't even migrate permissions a lot of times on some of their a lot of times when they do the migrations is what they're saying, which I found surprising.
Yeah, well, I haven't even heard of MoveBot.
I think there's value actually in not migrating, because there's a conversation I was having elsewhere about small business to large business woes, and generally when you're doing a migration, it's a sign of growth, of some kind. Something's happening with that business, and so there's two things that I've actually done in the past. Is I find the most qualified representative in the company that would act as legal, and have a nice talk with them about data retention policies, whether they exist or not, and have them spread the word that, hey, now's a good time to delete all those emails from 5 years ago that you don't need anymore. All those engineering logs that are coming from GitHub, all those emails from vendors, all those things. Go through, and you can set up filters. You can teach them how to do it and have them delete as much as possible before you do the migration, and talk about how much make it better. Companies can save money on the migration.
Or in the case of permissions, you can just not migrate them.
Set them up brand new. Go through the permissions exactly on the new thing, like what Steve was saying. He thought it was weird, but I see benefit of it too.
Yeah.
Each permission, yeah, not to harp on that.
Especially in the case where you're going from a super small company to a mid-size, because that's the moment when you cross over between everybody can see this and we need to start segmenting.
Remove the 10 super admins that don't even work in IT.
Right, because yeah.
Well, and I think timing matters. If you do an acquisition and you do it within a very close time of the acquisition, you can probably get away with that. I know for us, we kind of pushed off this idea of migrating 3 different orgs into ours, and so
because we're not fully consolidating.
Correct.
So our culture doesn't support the acquisition mindset kind of stuff.
Yeah, and that's a good point. It's not really an acquisition as much as just making collaboration work a little better for us. And so, we took a different approach, or a very permission heavy approach, because we wanted to make it as least painful for our users as possible at the expense of our own sanities. But
Right.
Normally I don't think we would probably go this in depth that we have been, or that I don't think with most
literally cross-referencing file permissions and re-adding them. I don't know. I like the idea though of being able to say like start fresh, because I mean that's what happens when you do a Microsoft to Google migration. But I would assume when you do a Microsoft to Microsoft or a Google to Google, it's much the same, in that people expect it to work exactly the same, but they don't realize that the data is being copied in the background. We've actually just started telling them.
Like, I like promoting not importing calendars. Like, stop. Like, how many of those meetings actually matter? So start rebooking them fresh. Yeah.
We're only migrating the past year of calendar events. And that's it. And then if people wanna, if they need more than that, they're gonna have to do it themselves.
I've got a question. We've got an M&A that we need to take action on, and it's a Microsoft to Google. Have folks, and it's probably going to be unique to each situation, but the decision whether or not to use a separate, wholly separate Google tenant or Okta tenant from the one that you currently have.
Are you ever gonna want to merge them?
Well, I'll say it a different way. The overhead to manage two separate ones is enough to want me to make me want to keep it under one roof.
Yeah. Also, SAML authentication, SSO into any applications you're using becomes very much a problem with multiple tenants, because virtually every vendor, will only have one SAML provider into your account.
Yeah, I definitely would not recommend multiple Oktas, because then you need a single IDP at the top. Again, multiple Googles. I don't like the overhead personally. So for all of our Google instances, I have a super admin and a regular account. So I have 8 accounts plus service accounts.
There are a few tools out there that can help with that multi-SaaS management, isn't there?
Yeah, isn't there? There's probably a few.
But like,
can't think of them.
About changing like admin permissions, like
these are 8 Google accounts.
Yeah, and those are just like my named accounts.
Oh,
like,
yeah. So Yahoo actually allows you to sync all your Google accounts directly with your Yahoo account. It's a
yes, yeah, that sounds like an excellent idea. But I'm just saying, so like Mike, I think your thought about it being a lot of overhead is right.
Yeah, like we had a customer who expanded into the US probably like 1 or 2 years ago, and now they're looking to consolidate into one workspace tenant because of the overhead.
I don't think there's enough good reasons to segment them.
There's very few good reasons to segment them. Very few.
Because I mean, I can get away with enough of the segmentation within Google itself. So
yes, yeah, and there's some things you won't be able to segment, but especially like with target audiences and stuff now, and like some of that, like you can really do a lot. So I don't think it's worth it. If you think you ever might want to consolidate them,
but if
you've
got to have a different logo in the top right corner, then you got to have a different tenant. Seriously though, that was something one customer had to have. They were a construction company that were, the main parent company of all these subcontractors, and they all had their own independent brands, and they didn't want to see the parent company logo in the top right corner in the name.
I think we're gonna get even better on ours. So our companies are being consolidated in Google so that they can join a new subsidiary. We're combining them into a new subsidiary. They all keep their current brands, but then our parent company is also in that Google Workspace. So we're actually going to use the logo for this subsidiary so it's going to be a new logo for everybody. Nobody wins. Nobody gets to keep their logo.
That's the way to do it.
One logo to rule them all.
Yeah.
Maybe Google will actually allow org level logos, like they're doing org level for everything else, or logo based on the group that you belong to.
Slow down. They need to fix Google Drive for Macs first.
Oh, is it broken?
Yeah, for the
M1.
The M1 broken in the sense it doesn't work.
Yeah.
You can if you need a solution, use our clone mount for the time being. That'll at least get you by for the next few months.
So Paul has put a question in chat asking what's people's experience of Google Workspace Migrate or G Suite Migrate, as I think it's still branded because they haven't got around to changing it. We've used that a number of times. When I say we, my team have, because I like to delegate this stuff. And they've had great success with it. They thoroughly enjoy setting up the GCP project and doing all the permissions and building the sort of VMs that are needed and doing the map. And we're actually using that tool at the moment to get off all of our remaining file servers and move them all into shared drives or into SharePoint. And it's working incredibly well. Obviously, there is a cost, so you've got to be aware of that, and you've got to know to shut down or delete the VMs, once you've done your project, or if you have a lull in your project. But yeah, that's a very valuable tool. And I think that was a purchase. I can't remember who Google had purchased.
Yeah, the company's called AppBridge. Yep. They're a Canadian company. But it feels like there's a massive overhead with that particular solution. If I'm right in thinking, you've got to have multiple VMs, databases,
well, I think
3 or 4 machines.
That's the preferred setup. I think you can get away with some of that consolidated into fewer machines, but you're going to need a couple machines for it, and probably not as big as what they suggest, because they are targeting that at multiple thousand user migrations and plus. It's not for 1,000 less users. There's a lot of easier tools out there to use, like we've all been talking about before today. Yeah, that's for big migrations. It'd be nice to see Google release a Google to Google transfer solution one day. General availability, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, was there not talk of having trusted domains where you would have a trust between different domains and they would be able to move files between them? I remember there was talk of a very large a number of large customers wanting to go down that route that were putting the pressure on Google. No, but we never saw that come to fruition.
Yeah. Large Google customers have access to some things that Google hasn't publicly released to migrate Google to Google.
There was a thing around using shared drives as a moving truck. Steve, I think you'd written this up at some point.
Oh, the moving files from one tenant to another through shared drives?
Yeah.
Yeah. And,
I think Steve originally gave me the idea.
Yeah,
Tucker and I are doing the dissertation on it right now, if you want.
Yeah.
I think
And,
the only question too.
And Jesse also wrote a blog post about it. He actually gets like 1,000 hits a month on his blog post about that. He told me yesterday. He needs to do some updating. That was a little out of date, but yeah, it's possible. It's not super, it's not easy because it's not perfect. You got to account for challenges with that, and especially with permissions. It's and folders. So those are the two main things. Folder IDs and folder structure can't really get created. You have to create that on the destination and then move the files into each folder that you've created. And then file permissions don't always transfer across. Some of them will, but not all of them.
And you can't take Google Photos over.
Yeah, I haven't.
Oh, and there's these
I don't think
fun icon files that have a Unicode character in them that break GAMS reports. So like,
really?
There's a bunch of like weird gotchas.
Well, I spoke
people
to
have in their drives that you don't notice until you're trying to move them.
Yeah, when I was speaking with Michael from MoveBot the other day, I told him about this and shared him on the document that I wrote. And maybe if enough of us bug him and say we need a tool that does this, then maybe he'll build it into their migration tool. So
a tool that moves files through shared drives.
Yeah, and applies permissions that were on the source and making sure that they're applied on the destination the same way. Or even.
Please continue. I'm sorry.
I was just saying, and so not only doing the shared drive migration, but also doing a user to a shared drive and then back to the user type of a migration as well.
Yeah.
I forgot about it until you guys were talking about it, but one of the data migrations included an entire library of bootlegged movies on a company Google Drive thing, and it was such a large piece. We missed it because of other large CAD drawings and CAD systems that were being stored in other people. So everybody's size seemed right until I got to this person's and I saw the names of the files being transferred. It's like Harry Potter 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, it's this when it comes to doing that housekeeping and deleting all of those old voicemail messages and the mailing list messages and the office emails about pizza in the kitchen. So yeah, it's just like you're moving house. You rent a dumpster or a skip, as they would call it in the UK, and throw out everything that you don't want moved to your new house.
Yeah, temporarily buy a Synology and download all of it to that, then lock it down and ask people to pay you to get files out of it.
Talking of Synologies and moving stuff, has anybody moved huge amounts of data to the cloud by getting one of the Amazon boxes or the ice buckets or the Google thing,
One of our
stick it in your data center and then putting a UPS label on it?
It's called the Snowball.
We did the transfer utility with Google for a client, Shed Aquarium. They had terabytes of data. And,
yeah, one of our orgs is a production company, and we had one.
Yeah.
Are they still valid, viable, used, or?
I mean, yeah. I mean, if you have a lot of on-prem data that you need to get up, and the time and your bandwidth is not sufficient to transfer it over the net, it's definitely a needed solution. But it's a niche solution, so not many people are going to need that. But it's available, and it's
Does Google have something similar?
Yeah, it's called a transfer something. I forget what it's called. Yeah, transfer utility.
There's the same tools. Yeah, I was thinking also in the reverse direction, especially during the migrations of taking all that data and bringing it into a non-cloud solution, and then allowing people to actually pick and choose what still needs to be in the cloud for after migration. In the same context of like cleaning up and only moving forward with what you need. Everyone freaks out like, we don't want to lose all of our old data, and it's like, well, if we lock it away for 5 years and you never ever need to touch it again, then there's your investment on just in case. But
do you store those archives locally though? We store those in the cloud too.
Well, yeah, the business I had at the time was very short on budget, and so I said Synology, but they couldn't even afford that. So I had something even more janky. I was just trying to impress everybody with multi-drive rated system, but they chose to just download onto little handhelds, and I said, okay, if you guys want it in the cloud, you guys do it, but the risk is there. But that saved us from moving all that data directly into the new instance and just continuing to harbor it on the new instance. That was the point.
Yeah, it's called transfer appliance, Rose. What it's called.
What would we suggest? Actually, Rose, back to that Ignite. Like, if we're not going to use Google to store that and keep it off of what other platforms have we used in the past? I've used Ignite in the past to kind of keep a separate instance.
Like most of our big archives, like our old ones, are in Dropbox. They all ended up in Dropbox. Yeah. So it's separate from Google Drive, but it's not. It's still in the cloud. Yeah. We don't like having servers.
Does anybody still have servers? I got an email this afternoon from a guy that wanted to tell me about his new server inventory that he had in his resale company, and I was like, poor guy. Yeah, we're planning on getting rid of 2 servers this year in 2 offices, and the rest of the file servers are going.
Yeah, my favorite is
what's an office?
My favorite is people who are looking to get new jobs and like, I'm looking for like on-prem, and like, no, you're not. Like, and they get a SaaS job and they're like, what was I missing this whole time? Why? Like, what was my stupidity?
We have interesting conversations of on-prem versus not, and it comes down to HIPAA compliance, believe it or not. And it depends on the use case of how much that data actually needs to traverse out to external services or even customer facing. If it's not, on-prem really saves our a lot of headaches. And so we make them a compliance on-prem piece and lock it down. And if any data happens to traverse into it, they are worry-free. They just go in there and delete it and it's done.
Well, yeah, and like Rose said, we have a video production affiliate that, 20 plus workstations. We're not, 4K. We're not doing that over the net. Like that ain't gonna happen.
So here's a pivot on the migration question, because I think we've, I guess, exhausted a little bit about data and user going from one platform to another, and we branched off and spoke about servers. Obviously, Active Directory GPOs, brilliant when you're on premise. Doesn't work when everybody's remote and they've got a VPN in to get the new GPO policy or get an update. Migrating off of Active Directory as your identity and moving to Azure AD or Jump Cloud or something else. What are people's thoughts on that? Has anybody done that? Is it a plan for 21 or 22?
We've killed AD and moved everything to Okta. Actually, we have a smaller. So at the moment, the only thing on AD is Wi-Fi, and even that we've got a plan to pull it off. But yeah, and I don't know a huge amount of detail, but I can point you to a blog post where we've talked about it because Okta like talking about the fact that we've moved off of AD into Okta. But yeah, we've got pretty much like we're a Mac shop, so it means that we don't have to worry about the hardware side of things, and so. We basically did a thing where we had turned from AD as the master to AD as an application essentially, and then have slowly been like pulling things out of that.
So you're just managing everything through Jamf.
You have everything deployed for Jamf, so you are using an MDM.
Sorry?
Are you using an MDM?
We use simple MDM. But yeah.
Because I was going to say that I think the thing people forget is Active Directory is both a directory and an MDM in a way. It's managing your laptops at the same time that it's providing their identities. And those things are different in the SaaS world. Some things are MDMs, some things are identity providers, some things are both. So it depends on what you're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, we've been pretty lightweight on the hardware management side anyway. So simple works really well because it's just the Apple APIs and a bit of a skin around it. But that's been our approach.
Has anyone switched to the Google directory for Windows management? I know there's been a few video sessions.
Not yet, but that's my plan. We're on Jump Cloud right now. But now that Google's made pretty good strides in that arena, I think we want to do that because our MDM management is through Google, even though Jump Cloud now has some MDM management built into it. But we'd just rather get everything all back in one shop. But we made the jump to Jump Cloud from no Active Directory or anything like that. So no computer management really at all because we were smaller, and now we're Jump Cloud. I saw that. So I've been researching that to kind of implement that this year.
Yeah, we haven't done that yet, but something that we're looking at because we have we let people use Macs PCs. Either way, we don't have a ton of PCs, but so we have like an Azure AD instance that's basically just authenticating through Okta to let people sign in locally. But the Google directory would be cool. I just think it's funny because all of Okta's ads are like, pull the plug on AD, and then all of their support documentation is like, install this Active Directory agent.
I find that so frustrating. I can +1 that one right there.
Yeah, so it's nice to see another company take an approach that like isn't really just using AD as a crutch in the back end.
Yeah, I was actually helping a customer with a Google to Google migration. So not only were they using, I guess, Google for collaboration, but they were also using GCPW for Windows sign-in and also the Windows 10 management capabilities as well. So we actually filed a bug report, which I think got resolved last week. So they were moving the devices across from one tenant to the other, but on the source tenant, they were unable to unenroll the devices from the console. So that was a roadblock for the actual migration. So we filed a bug report. Now you should be able to unenroll the devices and re-enroll after it's unenrolled.
Are there a lot of, so we have a heterogeneous environment. We have Mac, Windows, and Chrome OS. I feel like either people are really just dividing those and splitting them when they think about management, or they're homogenous. Because like we only choose tools that work with both. We never choose things that only work with Windows or only work with Mac. That's why we don't have Jamf. It's too expensive to consider that it's not our entire organization. And we'd have to have something else to manage the Windows. And then we'd still have to buy Chrome licenses.
What's the split up of your fleet though? Are you like, is it like 30-30-30 or?
Nah, it's like 60-30-10 Windows.
Yeah, I mean, we're like 95% Mac, so I was happy to go with a best in breed Mac solution for that, and just, you know, we'll find something separate for the very few Windows users we have.
Yeah.
I think it's
to that. Does anybody have any good recommendations for that tiny little sliver of Windows?
Well,
You know, I've got like 10 in the environment.
Yeah,
And
when
that's
you need to manage Windows, but it's not at scale.
when you talk to the MDM providers, like they'll all say, you know, we want to be the best in breed for Mac, but your best in breed for Windows is Intune, which who wants to set up Intune? But it really is kind of your best in breed for Windows, which is frustrating.
Randy, our needs are lightweight, so I think we're in the process of looking at using Google to manage our Windows machines.
My usage would be super lightweight too, so I'm, you know.
Jump Cloud does a great job of that. They do have some, they've built in more policies and things like that. So we were really lightweight. We had no AD, 20 workstations, wanted something. They started out pretty affordable, and it's still pretty affordable in general, but they do have a lot of functionality. They're trying to really mirror kind of both.
Yeah, they consider themselves to be an Active Directory replacement. So they
Correct.
do both the identity and the MDM. And that's why we've had them for such a long time.
For as heavily as I use Jump Cloud, I had totally not thought about that.
There are tools out there that do centralized platforms for enterprise-wide device and app and content management. He said, reading the tagline for Hexnode, which is the standard for unified management of your endpoints,
Sure,
which would allow you to manage everything under one umbrella. Obviously, it's not an identity, and there is value, I guess, in having your identity doing your MDM as well. I really like Azure AD and Autopilot, but we are 95% Windows and 5% Mac.
Well, teach me something. I'm not in the weeds of all this, so I might be speaking a little naively, but we're a Workspace ONE /Monkey/Chef combination, and I think we're able to fit all of our devices, maybe sans Chrome, into that. Experience with Workspace ONE kind of being the foundation of MDM for both Mac and Windows.
And his Workspace ONE, is that a Dell product or a EMC? Is
VMware.
AirWatch, yeah.
AirWatch.
Yeah, AirWatch. Which VMware bought.
Everything gets rebranded, moved around. It's difficult to know what their history is.
I wasn't a part of their Google to Google migration either, but I didn't want to be a part of it. They didn't do that. I'm just kidding. No experience. No one's speaking of. I was curious if anybody else had experience with Workspace ONE, AirWatch for both Mac and Windows.
I used it not really, because I used it like 5 years ago. And before VMware bought it, but I do remember I hated it because it was very like enterprisey. Like, yeah, it managed both, but every time I had to do anything, I had to like either schedule a call with somebody or like read a really long tutorial on how to implement like add a policy, to implement a thing, to add a group, to do a blah, just to like make one change. But it might be better now.
We have a small list of things that are published features that don't work, and we have to dance around it.
Yeah, I've used it for some mobile management before for Android and iOS. Yeah, I've noticed that some of their documentation, they have too much documentation, so you don't really know which version is the latest that they have published.
Have a silent pause. This is where I'll edit in a radio commercial from our sponsors.
I'll send you. I'm about to share the fleet management at scale document that Google released a couple years back. Let me just get it into the shared drive here and give you guys permissions for it.
Yeah, if you put the link in the chat, I can add it to the show notes as well, maybe.
I have a question, Colin,
Yes.
for future people watching this recording. If somebody's approaching their first migration and has no idea where to start, what tips do these experts have for that person?
Get a reseller.
Find a partner, definitely.
Fair enough. It's a good answer.
Yeah, you're doing
At least consult with them, right? Like.
I was gonna say, even if they're not doing the migration, yeah.
But if you're in our community, just ask us.
I was gonna say, isn't this where the partners on the call just like advertise themselves?
Somebody in the community just asked for a reseller, so I'm surprised there's no answers on that thread yet. I'm surprised nobody's jumping on that, or they slid right into the DMs. What's that?
It's because we're busy doing migrations.
Yes.
Fair point. Fair point.
Yeah, well, maybe that's why Dominic's not here.
My advice would be to clear out all the data that you don't want to migrate.
If you can, yeah.
It's a great opportunity to organize stuff, and also be early and consistent with your comms and be clear. And I've often created a guide, given it to the IT team, and then obviously we've got an IT brain, so then I'd give it to an end user and say, does this make sense? What don't you understand? What should I tweak? Then tweak it and then send it out to people. Because so many things we as IT people take for granted that wouldn't make sense to an end user. And we produce a lot of animated GIFs. People won't read instructions, but they'll watch an animated GIF.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key. I've done a few migrations. I think the key is exactly what you just said there, Colin. It's the user. You've got to educate the user, because there are small things like calendars, reoccurring appointments in Exchange don't go over as reoccurring appointments in Google because they are not the same. It doesn't have the same functionality. Google Drive to Google Drive migrations with the old hierarchy of folders being inside folders with inside the original folder, and all the funky things that users were able to do back in the day, which would cause migration tools to just vomit all over your new source. So you need to really understand what it is you're going from and to, and make sure that the users are well educated, that it's not going to be a like for like. There are going to be some nuances, and educating those users and those people about those nuances is the key to success. And if you don't have to migrate calendars, just don't. If you don't have to migrate certain amounts of data, just don't do it. Migrations can be very, very painful. They can also be super easy. If it's just email, you've got a result. If people just want to move all of their email, you just sit back and get a strong cup of coffee and wait. But if they're doing anything more complicated, then I think it's the users that need to be communicated to.
Yeah, wise words. Any last minute thoughts, questions, tidbits as we get close to the top of the hour?
Don't be like Rose or Chris in migrations.
Well, the backstory for people who are probably watching this later is that we enlisted the help of a partner to do a Google to Google migration. And then we decided that we don't like the way that they're doing Drive migrations, or the way that anybody is doing Drive migrations. And so we decided to do it ourselves, thinking that we knew enough about Drive to make it happen and do the shared drives method. But for all the many reasons that Paul just mentioned and Steve mentioned earlier and stuff, that's a complicated mess.
Yeah, we learned why we did.
The orgs in question have been on Google for 2 years, 5 years, and 10 years, respectively. So like they have mounting wildly different amounts of complexity.
And what do you do? Sorry, Chris. What are you doing about the folders? Because there is no API to there was, oh god, yeah, you've got all of that shenanigans going on. But just the plain simple fact that a folder in Google Drive can't be moved. So you can't move it from one shared drive to another. You've got to create a brand new one. And then if you've got that link that you've emailed somebody, then that gets broken. So
we're doing it in the UI. We're clicking and dragging them.
But even that creates a brand new folder.
It does.
So
it does. Yes, we can't preserve the folder links.
Yeah.
We can't preserve the file links, and so.
So did you create a lookup file? I mean, one of the things that I would have done is create a lookup file so that
like 1 million file reports. So yes. Oh no, we did not. We're not creating lookup files either, because we're in the neighborhood of 3.5 million files at least. So it's not sustainable. That file would not be useful to anyone.
No, sorry. I mean, lookups of the folders so that you could potentially, if you really wanted to, then go through people's emails and then go, right, you've got this folder.
No, we're not.
This folder has now been moved to something else. So it's just a case of it's moved.
We're just telling people like, hey, this changed and it's still shared with you. You just have to search for it. You can find it. It's just education. It goes back to Colin's point to just communicate to the users what these changes are going to be, and they're typically okay.
Part of the migrations are as difficult as the change management part, right?
Are you gonna do a blog on that?
All migrations.
They can do an entire book about that, Paul. Not just a blog. They know everything about this now.
Yeah, I recently.
They asked questions about BigQuery at some point because they couldn't process the data anymore.
Yeah, Excel was crashing.
Excel reports were so big I couldn't even open them in Excel.
How wide did you say the table was, Chris? 3 letters?
Oh no, Rose, you had one that had over 95 permissions?
Yeah, it's 5 or 6 rows, 5 or 6 columns per permission. So, yeah.
I don't think we got to 4 letters in the columns, but we got really close.
Some like truly epic spreadsheets.
Yes, pushing the
boundaries. Don't be like Rose
and
Chris when you try to migrate stuff.
And we keep mentioning Excel because we keep mentioning Excel not because we like Excel, but because Google Sheets was like, this is too big, go away.
I didn't want to use Excel. I've been using Google Sheets for 10 years. I don't even know how to use Excel even.
Probably needed a developer machine with 32 gig of RAM to load that Excel document as well. So
I literally had a conversation with our help desk manager who picks the hardware that we use. And I was like, I don't think this RAM is enough.
This is true though. I've had to run into that too, where finance folks are like, we want Excel and we can't open a spreadsheet because it's too big. And so we basically, build a machine that is qualified to operate a Hadron Collider and just have them run their Excel on that.
But basically, the product that Steve was talking about, where they might build a migration service that works through shared drives, I mean, it'll have its own limitations too, but that would have been a dream for something like this. Because y'all, there are multi-parented files that Google doesn't even show are multi-parented.
Yeah, or you're called Salesforce, called Google, and they press 2 buttons and it basically works.
Yeah, or that.
Ever dealt with orphan files? Those are fun.
Oh yeah, no, orphans are.
Brian knows about that down. That's Brian.
Working on cleaning the stuff up, right? Shortcuts was supposed to help with the multi-parented and the permissions issues. Then they're going to be cleaning up orphans, so there can't be any orphans anymore, and just orphan files will appear in your MyDrive. And now you can't add external files to your MyDrive. They would have to add it to a folder they have access to. So Google's working on cleaning that stuff up, and that all happened in the middle of our migration, as well as them changing their name, which was also fun.
Yes, the goalposts always seem to be moving, and new technologies come along, new applications to help us do these migrations, and then new problems to get in the way. But
and the applications themselves improve. So like we have shared folders and shared drives now, which is a huge deal.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank everybody for their time and thoughts on this subject, and we will reconvene at another time and carry on the discussion.